Call the General Government Committee meeting to order. We're looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion. Yeah. Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? If not, all's in favor?
Aye.
Carries. How about our minutes from our August 14th meeting?
Move to approve.
Second.
On minutes? Not all's in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Are there any public comments? Or any public comments? All right, are there any supervisors not seated as committee members that have any information for this committee? All right, we'll have a discussion and possible action regarding funding for outside agencies.
And we'll liven this up a little bit.
Yeah, we're almost done.
If you want to put the slides up here, I think you have this in front of you. Every year, one of the things that the board does is reflect on outside agencies. There's an opportunity for us to support the initiatives that we feel are important, as well as to influence or decide that others are better off on their own. As you can look this year, we had 8 outside agency requests, and all but 1 have been presented or we have funded before. The one new group that I have provisionally included in here is the Community Referral Agency, CRA. Remember, they're the ones that prevented shelters for battered women and some other things. So that is a new group. But as you can take a look here, we have the Economic Development Corporation. Let me just say this too before we get into the details. Our goal here, given the message that we've sent the entire organization, is to keep things flat, given the economy and given the challenges ahead. And so we have tried to keep our total funding on these things as flat as possible. And if you recall the presentations, some of these groups did a very good job of illustrating, here's what we're doing with your money, and they're always trying to do more. Others, just were less specific and just asking for money. Not that it isn't good. So you can see in the middle column there, granted by Polk County in 23 versus what they were requesting in 24. The EDC was flat, which provisionally we are suggesting we continue. Kinship went up $2,000, a very minimal increase. If you recall, I know they're a popular organization that does good work. Provisionally saying, yes, that may make sense because they have had some additional expenses incurred because of the county. We've had them move from the old jail into our county building. They're updating their office space and so on. So a minimal amount we provisionally approved. The Historical Society as well. Tourism, if you recall, we've been giving them 60,000. They requested 80. I think their reasoning was they wanted 70, but because we didn't give them 10,000 last year, they wanted 80 this year. We have recommended that, are recommending that we keep them flat at the going rate. Community Referral Agency, 10,000 is their request. Thought being, since it's new to the system and we thought let's dip our toe, so to speak, with this one and offer them $6,000 to support their cause, and let's see how they use that and how they can respond to what we ask of our agencies. The fair came in requesting less money than what we've been giving them historically, and so we will continue that at the amount they requested. West Cap is the same, and Regional Planning Commission is mandated by state legislation that if they have a formula, and so it went up $3,100. So total in budget for outside agencies is just under $312,000.
I might not have been around, and the last time we heard that number about the fair coming in at less than they were given in 23, did we figure out why that was? We're in requesting less.
Right. And I suspect it has, their operations and what they're doing and maybe some things, Mo, we've done. We've worked on some things with them and improved some buildings and so on. So maybe it's just a matter. I don't recall a specific thing that they dropped.
Just curious.
Do Mo?
Just their 23 operating costs are right around $45,000. So it's pretty flat, actually. The 56, I'm not sure of, but it's actually a flat request, the same.
All right.
Any questions, concerns?
Need a motion to make this our recommendation from this committee?
Don't think so. I think we'll present these to the general board, but you all, we wanted the general government committee to see these. So if you had any comments or concerns, you could voice them now.
My only comment is I would encourage tourism as much as possible to, I know there's still a vacant seat on economic development, and they should probably have somebody, that works more closely with economic, because economic development with that now, it's no longer additional, but with the, what used to be that additional $10,000, they've done so much good with that. And economic development is kind of an exemplar as far as like taking this budget from the county and doing big things with it. And I think I would just encourage tourism to work as much with economic development as they're able to.
Yeah, are you talking about an increase in tourism?
No.
budget? Oh,
No, just functionally,
to work with them rather than.
yeah, because there's some things that we're not taking advantage of, like I said, we could sit somebody, the way that things are set up and the way that discussions have gone in the past, there's a board seat on economic development. I think that's basically ready and waiting for somebody from tourism, and it's not been filled. So if they have somebody in tourism that could be at those economic development meetings, I think it'd be a big boost to.
How would you go about doing that? Putting somebody, recommend or encouraging somebody from the committee to go and visit with economic development meetings, or?
We just have to talk to the folks on the tourism board to see if they have anybody who they think is a good person to sit in with economic development
Together.
and bring back what they learned from EDC. And
I think if you recall, a couple of years ago, we encouraged tourism, the museum, and who was the other third one where we said, let's
Historical Society.
historical society, well, that's museum, to kind of mix and match an EDC, that's who it was, to kind of try to get board members shared throughout so that we could understand what each group is doing. Tourism they have included people from horse stakeholder groups or one person. I think they have a person now who kind of represents snowmobiling, which was a step in the right direction. They have not been successful in placing anybody on EDC or with the Historical Society. And I think it was just a way, that resolution, if you recall, was to say, if we're going to give you money each year, we need to be consistent in how we operate and that the money is going toward common goals and beliefs. And I think tourism has made some steps in that direction. I think they could still do more. So.
because I'm happy to see that it stayed at the $60,000 level, because I don't think additional money is the answer. I think using the existing money more effectively is what they can do. And I think they have a lot of opportunity to do that. And there's resources that aren't being tapped into yet that can help them out.
Okay.
All right,
Don't go too far away.
Oh.
You're good.
Yeah, next slide, Claire. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to briefly provide a budget update. I feel like I've been up here for too long already talking about budget, but we got a few more meetings to go. We'll go to the next slide. Just in terms of timeline, right now, we've got a couple more committees to present to. But then next Tuesday, Vince will sort of open the kimono and do the first reveal on the 2024 budget. He'll be fully dressed, don't worry. There's nothing untoward that'll happen. I think things are looking pretty good. Next slide. We're in the home stretch. The general government departments are balanced right now. And overall, I think we're looking okay. There still may be some curveballs. And there are some outstanding or remaining unknowns, WPPA contract, which is an agenda item for later today. And then we just met with our new actuarial group from our healthcare consultancy last week, trying to get a sort of dial in where we think healthcare expense will be next year. As I've said a couple of times to this committee, we had a bad 2022 with respect to healthcare expense. And our forecast for 23 is going according to plan, which is we're spending more than we'd like. And we're afraid that we'll be spending more than we'd like in 2024 on healthcare. We're examining our stop loss, which is our second tier of insurance. So if we have claims, any individual in any given year over $200,000, we have an insurance policy that covers that. We recently, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, received a hefty increase on our stop loss premium. Basically, when our folks hit stop loss, our insurer pays attention, and it's kind of like the Fram oil filter commercials from the 70s. If you're around for that, some of you probably weren't. You know, you pay me now or pay me later. And so we got this $440,000 increase on our stop loss premium. So we're investigating that. But those are really the two remaining considerable unknowns for us. Now we have parked some resources to cover these budgetarily, and we'll see where we end up with WPPA in particular. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is your stop loss insurer the same company that we do with anything other than anything affiliated with the medical cost?
They're a totally different entity, sir. And we can shop that, and our healthcare consultancy, JA Counter, can help us with that.
Is that out on the market?
It is currently not out on the market, but we're working with, it's sort of complicated. We work with health partners and the insurer to try to get a bead on what our forward going stop loss is likely to be. And so JA Counter is negotiating with health partners on that and the stop loss organization. So I think we're doing what we can. We've also looked at changing, I think I said last time, changing the levels. Because we had all that expense in 2022 and we thought, well, then maybe we'll look at lowering the stop loss. Well, we see what happens with the stop loss. We've got it at 200,000. They've increased our premium. So going down with stop loss, probably not likely. Going up, we could take more risk. We could boost it from 200 to 225 or 250. But then we're just going to be covering more. Our stop loss premium likely to go down, but we'll be covering more expense. It's a tough one.
Well, it's sure got to be paid attention to.
Absolutely
There's
so.
some disastrous stories on that type of insurance through Farmington Mutual, for an example, and some of these small mutuals that didn't
have
get their
enough
stop loss
reserve.
and wiped it. Well, they had to assess all the owner the insureds, thousands of dollars. Yeah, you're right. Well, good.
Any other questions before we move over to additional funding requests? So just as in terms of process, we ask our departments and divisions to do two things. They work with the budget that we send them. This year that was flat. And then we ask for additional funding requests. So new projects, new capital expense, new things that they'd like to do in the forward year. And so in a few minutes, Vince will be going over those lists for you. You'll see three piles. There's a pile of capital expense that could be paid for through general fund or through borrowing. And I think last time when Jonathan presented, he mentioned that we had a surplus for 2022. Half that, roughly, my financial manager will be frowning when I say this, but roughly half that amount is available for reinvestment in capital projects if the board chooses to do so. We also have a special fund called the 110 Fund, which is essentially an internal loan fund where the county loans money to a department. And then we have some operating, a list of operating additional funding requests. And that is the pile that we're still working to see if we can fund any or all of. So with that, I'll turn it over to the administrator. Unless there's questions.
Okay, the additional, and first of all, let me just say that Don has done a great job, as well as our directors. The communication out to the team has been, we have to be disciplined in the additional funding requests. It sometimes could look as if folks say, oh, good, this is my chance to ask for, our Christmas list, things we want. I don't think that happened. This year was much more disciplined and reasoned in their approach as to what they could request and then what, in essence, we would accept or recommend. This first one are additional funding requests that you can take a look at. These are the ones that we would recommend funding through our internal loan account, the 110 account. And you can see things that you may have heard in other committees. The sheriff was requesting some upgraded dispatch consoles to help the efficiency and the effectiveness of their call staff. The need for internal cameras, tasers, a small update in the fitness center. If you guys know, we have a fitness center down in the lower level. It's very dated. And yet it's something, you talk about healthcare costs, and you talk about mental health and so on. It's a nice little thing. And we're talking about just some minor changes we can do to that to not only improve the equipment that makes it more relevant, but also just the setting to entice more people to use that. And then also updating a jail cell checking program. So in terms of the loan fund, the 110 account, it's about $330,000 that we will recommend funding, that in turn, those divisions or departments will pay back to the county over time each year. Okay, next page or next slide. These are capital requests, and we have here a recommendation that these be accepted. These are provisionally approved by me so far, and with the recommendation, we have here that it be supplied through the surplus of our general fund. So I think we think what about how much in the surplus? Or do we?
We had a question come up in the investment committee about what the surplus was from 2022.
For the general fund, it was 5.5. They decorated. They're right on the main drain. Yeah.
Not available.
Right on.
Well, the surplus.
What was total?
Finance manager says it's 5.5.
So half of that under our policy would be
Without the
available
levy,
to spend,
yeah.
not that we have to. So, we thought about this and we might have a couple of options. Because our finance analysts would say, we need to maintain a certain level of borrowing of funds, bonding, so that we keep our levy flat. There doesn't seem to be a great appetite for that. And it might be an appropriate year to send that message that we're not going to borrow this year, but rather save it for the next year or two or three if we think there might be some larger type of capital program. If you look on here, many of these, other than those top ones, the highway projects and so on, are not as expensive And so the thought being this would be a good year to maybe use that general revenue surplus to pay for these capital expenditures as opposed to bonding for it. So you can see there the highway projects we've heard Mo talk about. I'm certainly happy to do that. The installing of security glass at the Justice Center, that is a very expensive proposition in the county clerk's office. And as Malia tells me, there are a lot of angry people that go up there when they have to pay fines and,
Clerk of courts,
yeah, clerk of courts, what did I say?
county clerk.
County clerk. Angry people there too. But so that's something that we thought, you know, it's certainly a worthy project. Now, one of the things we've also done over there is we've increased, we think, our manual security in that we'll be removing Permar and adding in some of our own staff, the corrections officers, people who are trained. So we think that we're enhancing security over there as is. The CISA building is something we need to be thinking about. The air conditioner, Mo is in need of a recycling truck, and you can just go down there, the boiler at CISA. So that building there is starting to need some repair. So it's one of those things where we need to do that. Otherwise, it's going to be, you know, an emergency situation. So you can go down there. So the total cost of those projects from the various departments or divisions is about 1.2 million. So if we had, what do we say, 2.5 or 2 million, then that we're well within that. And so we'd still be putting money, additional money into the general fund for that rainy day fund, so to speak. Any questions on those?
So when we're talking the general fund surplus, that's that, and I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, but that's that money that's left over from ARPA that got moved in there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so certainly ARPA resources help the county. And we had we categorized that money separately until this past audit year, when we moved the ARPA dollars to the general fund.
Yep.
So there's no more ARPA dollars. There may be projects related to ARPA, but all of the money is in the general fund. And in our investment committee, we were discussing general fund minus all of our assets, financial assets minus the health related fund. We were at $22 million, $24 million. And so that's the general, that's in the general fund. Now, the accountants look at the general fund slightly differently, and they say we've got 30.5 million in the general fund. Is that right, spendable?
31.
31. So by policy, half of that is available in any given year for the projects of the county, which would be 15.5 million. Now, a lot of that has already been spent or encumbered. So this past year, putting $5.5 million additional into the general fund at that 50% rule, we would have half of that available. Now, what I'm guessing you're asking for is the list of projects and the amount of money that's in the general fund that isn't encumbered. So hasn't already been spoken for.
Right.
And we think that is around $9 million. So this would, if we spend the 1.2 million or 1.3 that the administrator is suggesting, there'd be $7.7 million left that was available for projects for the county before you hit that 50% threshold.
Before you hit the 50, so
Yeah,
it could
otherwise,
be,
then you've got your sort of your savings account that you're not supposed to dip into unless the board says, okay, we've got some sort of fiscal situation that we've got to lower the amount of that 50%. We've got to go below that. You'd have to agree as a board to do that. 3/4 of you would have to agree to do that. So if you have $9 million of spendable, the administrator is suggesting you spend about 1.3 of that on these projects.
Given that it's surplus past year, we're still adding to the general fund. The alternative would be you could finance this and borrow the money, but our feeling is that interest rates, the way they are, we're better off probably just paying for it now.
And so for 24, we'd be left with around 7.7.
Of spendable.
Yeah.
The other thing I would just briefly point out is all of these are capital expenses, not operating. So what you've seen so far are essentially investment type purchases, and the administrator will discuss some operating expenses in a moment.
What's an average yearly spendable amount? Like, if we're going in an extra 7 million on a year over year, what's our normal?
That's such a great question. COVID disrupted the pattern for the county because we had such a large influx of money from other sources that are really extraordinary. And so I wouldn't want, I can't tell you, I'd be happy to try to do an analysis, but we would see a big increase over the last 3 years due to the money coming from the federal government and the state. So what we're trying to do now is just, we talked last year about kind of a COVID and ARPA hangover, and we spent a lot of money, and we're trying to moderate that at this point. And as the administrator mentioned, there aren't a lot of big ticket items on this. It's more like a long list of deferred maintenance projects and other necessary work. So argues perhaps for using our own resources rather than bonding, like you might for a large project.
Do we know, I had asked you before, do we know how we compare to other comparable counties as far as that 50% number being put away? Cause like, so 31 is like our total revenue, is that?
Our total revenue? No, or sorry. This is 31, we should think of as our savings account.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So is this, so in that 50% that gets put away, that gets rolled over to the next year in that savings account?
Right.
So this is me trying to learn how, like, if we do 50% every year, how are we not just stacked in that thing? Where does that go?
Could I just clarify quickly what
Yeah.
the 50% requirement is actually 50% of the general fund expenditures on the prior year's audit is the required reserve. So basically what we're saying is we need to have a reserve of 50% of what we spent in total general fund expenditures in the prior year at any given time in the current year.
Mhm.
So it's not, you're not just compiling on top of it unless that expenditure number.
So you're just marking for the next year, you have to have at least 50% of what was spent in the previous year.
Essentially, yes.
As you can imagine, what would happen sometimes as boards change, staff changes and so on.
Mhm.
Some people may say, oh, this is important this year, let's spend it. We got this money in the savings account, let's spend it.
Hmm.
This is a way to simply say, we need to be conservative. Yeah, if you need to spend it, you can, but it's going to take a higher percentage of the board to say, yeah, go deeper into that saving.
And that's where part of my question is at right now, because we've talked about in the past how Polk County is generally very, very lowly leveraged when it comes to debt, which I'm not arguing against. That's a good problem to have. We're not very high, leveraged in debt. But then also I had asked before, like, do we know how comparable we are to other counties as far as that 50% number, especially where we're looking at like increased costs and stuff?
Yeah. We're required to be at 20% or something about 20%. Most counties, we did a survey a couple of years ago, most counties were in that 35 to 50 range.
Mhm.
So we're at that 50%, which is, we feel good about. I mean, there were some higher than that, very conservative.
Some lower.
Hmm?
Some lower than 20.
Yeah, I think they're required. Now, they don't always stay there. You're right. But
Right.
if they need to get there, if they're not if they're below 20%.
For whatever reason, we don't know.
Yeah.
We actually almost at zero at one time.
As I
We were
recall,
like going to borrow money to meet operating expenses.
Yeah.
So in an effort to turn that around, I mean, we started on the path of 20%, 25, 30, 35 to get to the point where if we have a catastrophe,
Mhm.
we're gonna survive it without borrowing.
Right.
It's taken a long time.
It has, and I mean, I can remember that discussion with the board very clearly when they looked at each other and said, if we don't put limits on ourselves, we'll spend it. And I thought it was a very responsible way, and that keeps us, hopefully, I mean, not that we couldn't spend it, but it does keep us somewhat checked.
Yep.
And balanced.
Oh, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that 50%, especially when we're looking at everything being so tight and just having the discussion about whether that's holding a lot of money when we've got needs.
Okay, we go to the next slide. Those are the capital additional funding requests. These are the operating. And these are the things that we don't certainly want to dig into our savings account. We'd like to do these in a way that, you know, we're either generating revenue or from the current levy that we can do this so that we don't keep paying, you know, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. The things that we have a provisional yes to, including some personnel things for corrections officers, for building security, a dispatcher position. You've heard, I think, that Jill and the sheriff talk about those. Ordinance auditing, it's just software to make sure that we keep up to date on our ordinances because things change. And if you don't keep track of those things, you can get into to some challenges. Code enforcement, identity and access management solution. Trying to remember what that is.
That's just an IT security software purchase to make sure that we're who we say we are when we log into our computers.
Right. And then summer intern and Fiddler software. Now that is condensed document type. So in our Register of Deeds office, you know, you have these big closets and doors where people have to go in and search for documents. This is a way to condense those and make those easily retrievable. So those are some of these things we've been talking about for a few years and we've delayed and so on. And now we're just saying we think we can cover those in a responsible manner.
For them, all ongoing expenses for one time.
These would mostly be ongoing.
Well, doesn't replace,
I mean, the internship is generally 1 year, so I shouldn't say they're all ongoing every year. But
The correction officer and dispatch.
isn't the correction officer, isn't that part of the magnetic testing and stuff that we're already paying for? And it kind of offsets by some of that loss.
right, I think we've added additional one, Don, over in.
So to get this to work, we've looked at it and we figured if we had 3 people, we could have 1 here, 2 at the Justice Center like we originally planned, and then the 2 at the Justice Center could overlap because they need to be there for 9 hours versus 8. And then they can, when the person over here at the Justice Center, Government Center takes a day off, they can transfer one of those people over here. It's just to provide better security for Justice Center and Government Center. Just 3 people who did that. We've absorbed 2 of the positions through my budget.
One of those things where we continue to try to move people, stretch people, try to be more efficient. And I think when you get to security, removing Permar, we thought we needed that extra person over there to kind of help so we don't have people being too stressed and too stretched.
In that way, do we have anything, it doesn't look like it from these, but do we have anything that's needed or might be requested in the future as far as like getting some things off of law enforcement's plate, like extra positions or?
Maybe take that off our plate, the security.
So I'd gotten feedback from somebody saying that one of the biggest things right now turnover wise is that some folks are getting burnt out.
It's true, and these security positions actually have helped us. We've had a jailer, a 25-year jailer that took one of the security positions just because it gave them something different to do and they're excited about it, so.
Yeah.
We're opening it as seniority based to whoever wants it first, and so it does offer them some other options in the jail versus just being a jailer. Only 30 years.
I've just been curious because, you know, if we're having issues filling positions or if we need more positions, I don't know what the situation looks like over there, but
And right now, the jail staff is full staff with the 2 security positions we've hired to start the security project. And dispatch is full, patrol is short.
I was gonna say, what about for like patrol and deputies,
Patrol is short 2 positions right now.
like need to be filled?
And that's not that we don't have them funded, it's we
Yeah.
have to
Just trying to
hire
find
people.
candidates.
Yeah.
Is this security position a lateral position to a jailer? Or is this like could this be a pathway for recruiting officers?
Yeah, we're not looking at it as recruiting for officers, just, it's just a lateral, it's a position assignment, so there's no incentive to pay or anything like that, it's just an assignment.
So, and you see here then 252,000 approximately. These are things that we think we have, can manage in our revenues, in our levy that funds that we have and pay for these things, so. So I would just ask if you guys have any concerns or questions, or if you feel good about this. You know, draw a consensus. Would a consensus help here, Malia? Or do we?
That's one question I have was, at the last board meeting, we approved the housing fund or
I can address that.
is this gonna be covered or?
It will be, but it will just be reclassified. So we have $200,000 in cash. We're gonna turn it into a loan, and then it will be a receivable on our balance sheet. So essentially, there's no net change for the county. We'll have to encumber that $200,000 so it doesn't get spent twice, but it remains an asset. So that's why it's not on the list. That's a great question.
Anything else? Concern? Okay. Next, I think we're on to policies.
Actually, on to discussion regarding county board's compensation.
Oh,
24-26 term.
So if you recall, last time, the county board did not address it prior to the election and prior to taking out the intent to run. So it was not able to be implemented.
Even though we had a plan,
Right,
we were just too late.
right.
We've neglected to do it at that meeting.
Yeah.
So this is the opportunity to consider what currently exists and make any changes regarding meeting per diems, travel, that kind of thing.
Chairs, vice chairs.
Chairs, vice chair.
Do you have any idea what we were proposing?
There was a,
Time?
there was a substantial recommended increase in the chairs compensation, and that was primarily due to all of the extra time that was being put into being the chair. And so that was something that was recommended the last time that did not.
I
end
thought
up-
we actually were talking about a flat amount instead of a per meeting.
There
Or
was,
that not?
there was currently you have the salary for,
For the chair and
And the vice
the
chair.
chairs, but I mean, we were talking about, I thought, a flat amount for a supervisor.
Oh, like a salary for a super, I don't think that that's what was discussed.
I don't
Um,
remember that. But you would, if you remember it, but it didn't.
I don't remember a flat amount.
We probably just talked about
I
it.
think we
but never
talked
did
about it, but I
anything.
think it was knocked out because of the fact that some committees require so much
Well, yeah,
more
like-
attention.
You know, some are way more
Yeah,
time wise and amount of meeting wise.
Right.
The other thing to think about is the changes now that we have supervisors who from time to time appear by Zoom. Do you want to have that a reduced per diem? Or is the fact that they're not getting travel enough? But all of these things are policy decisions for the full board to make for the future board.
Yeah.
right.
Any ideas?
Keep it as is and
As
move
far,
on.
you're talking about ideas in reference to making recommendations as to what we should consider
Absolutely. This is like the meeting, we have to do it.
in order to give it
To
to
get
the
it
county
done
board.
and not end up where we did last term, where we had a plan that we were gonna bring forward, but it was too late. So then we
Yeah, I remember.
wanted to make sure that we got it on our work schedule, that we dealt with it on time. I know, some people think they should double the amount.
For the meeting or for the,
More
Per diem?
meetings, and I think too that we should review too especially the chair amount, I mean, and the time that's devoted to it. Do we have anything from 2 years ago that we can look back on?
Well, we've got the resolution from 2019, so that's 4 years ago of what was implemented.
What was implemented, but do we have the recommendation that we had that we were too late with last 2 years ago? This was a substantial increase for the chair.
That's what was recommended at that time. And if you recall, there was Chair Nelson spent a lot of time here. Chair Luke spends a lot of time going to almost every single meeting. So I don't
Them
know.
are,
I
them are
could,
per diem
Per diems,
meetings,
right.
aren't they?
then my understanding, I bill for those additional meetings that I go to, other than the ones that are mandated by the,
Yeah, but when you get called to come up and sign or
all that
review,
stuff, yeah,
that's not a meeting, so
no,
you're driving here.
right,
And not,
no.
you are getting paid already, but is that,
So it's a
does
$500.
that compensate the?
That compensation is mileage only. He didn't bill for it. I can tell you that, I can't remember how much does the chairman get?
$500 a month, $6,000.
3,000, isn't it?
No, I think it's
Six.
6,000.
Is it 6?
what's the
Okay,
budget?
it's 6,000. I can tell you the town chairmans make more than that. Considerably more than that.
Yeah, and I think they do
It's
per
true.
diem for meetings
So say
too,
some
which
of them
has
get per
been,
diems. In Lincoln Township pays $9,000 for annually for the chairman. And nothing additional.
and how about the members?
The members get 6,000, I believe.
Whether they attend the meetings or not,
Correct,
and you have meetings once a month,
correct. At least.
yeah.
There are additional meetings for open books and, those type of things. And additional meetings for various, no extra compensation for that. That's probably, there are townships make considerably more than that.
But again, townships don't have administrators doing their work for them either.
No, but they've got clerks.
What does the clerk get paid?
Our compensation is pretty good. I think we're up there for a part-time clerk at about 20,000, 20-some thousand a year. But I haven't checked lately, with the other townships. In fact, I never have, but I've seen lists of what they get, and you'll find that the townships are better paid.
But I don't think we can use the township as a
No.
comparable.
It's not a comparable, they do a lot less
Who does?
township.
I think they do more. I think they're more,
More
well, I
designated.
think they're more involved. They don't
Well,
have
yeah,
an
of course.
administrator and they don't have a finance
Of course,
person, and they don't have department heads. I mean, they're like the boss
yes.
and they make all the decisions. I've gone to some of their meetings. I mean, they're very involved, very intense, and they take a lot of responsibility. So
Yeah.
how do we compare with other counties
Well,
as far as?
they're all over the map.
There is.
And I recall last time looking at, and I haven't seen it lately, but they are all over the map. There were a few that were higher than us, several that were lower than us. I would say on average, we were kind of, in general, upper half. But they're all different because some people got reimbursed differently. They got
Yeah,
reimbursed for meetings or reimbursed for travel more.
Yeah,
less.
some have upwards of what, 37, 38 supervisors?
yeah.
Right.
So I mean, that's quite a few people to share the work with.
So currently then the chair gets 6,000 per year. The vice chairs get 1,000. Do we want to,
Additional. Right.
Yes.
You're correct.
do we want to start with that? Do we think that's a good amount? Or does it need to be lower, higher, or is there a recommendation there?
Well, I think the chair should definitely be higher.
Want to name a number?
9,000.
Okay.
No whispering.
I was just doing the inflation math from 2019.
The what?
Just thinking about inflation since 2019 into 2024. So you've got 5 years.
I think we would have raised the chair 2 years ago, definitely.
That seems,
If we would have got it on the floor
Yeah.
timely. We didn't, so nothing changed. So now another 2 years have gone by.
okay.
And if we miss this one, another 2.
So what does it look like if you just take into account inflation?
Well, I mean, if we just said, forget the compounding, but 4% over 5 years, 20%. 20% of 1/5 of 6,000 is what, 1,250? That'd be 7,250 if I'm doing the math right in my head. 9,000 would be 30 plus 33%.
But again, I don't think once we get it where it belongs, we're looking at increasing it every term.
We are or not?
I would say we are not. I mean, it almost like supervisors. I mean, once we feel we have a comparable amount for people to be reimbursed for their time for meetings, that it stays. I mean, it stayed the same for years and
I feel
years
like
and
2 years is
years.
two
That's
years
a
is a fair
reverse
period though to
inflation.
take a look at it.
The inflationary factor didn't kick in until just a few years ago. I mean, we went for years with nothing that changed.
Yeah,
If you're
the-
You're always gonna be
So-
reacting pretty far behind if you're going off of just inflation
If
alone.
we went for the inflationary factor and plug it in back to 20 years ago, see how it would look. And
I'm not even considering the inflation factor. I'm only considering the position and the time the person
Yeah.
devotes to it.
It,
And how should they be compensated? Above and beyond the rest of the supervisors.
And the other thing, if you look at it, like recruiting for a position, a job, are you trying to raise it in order to get more folks to run? Or are you trying to raise it just based upon, reasonable compensation for someone's donated time? I mean, if you're on environmental services,
Yeah.
you're getting that $100 for that 5-hour meeting. And if you're on executive, you're getting $100 for a 15-minute meeting
You
sometimes.
know,
So there's, you know, there's a lot of things to think about as far as what the intention is on setting an amount. In order, are you going to increase the chair's salary in order to have folks maybe who weren't considering being chair, wanting to be chair? Or is it, you know, just a fair compensation for that additional time?
yeah, and I think that, I don't know how many times it's been talked about to increase the chair and the vice chairs. But I do know it definitely 2 years ago would have passed.
Yeah.
Increasing the chair.
It was, it looked like it.
And I mean, some, Dan Ruck couldn't be here today. His recommendation is double compensation for meetings. And I'm not there, but that's his thoughts if he was here. So what, I mean, what's you guys' thoughts on? I mean, I know it's hard being at what, your second general government meeting, but I mean, you're not setting your per diem, you're setting the next terms per diem. Whether you run or not, I mean, we set the per diem for the next term.
I didn't know that we got paid until the first paycheck came, basically, or until I had to fill out my paperwork for it. So I am not super passionate about raising much of anything beyond keeping it fair for the level of work that people are doing, for sure.
That's gonna be hard to do
What's that?
as far as what each individual does.
Well, I'm not talking about individual, I'm more talking about the chair.
Oh.
As
okay.
far as every supervisor, like I said, I'm not super passionate about raising the rates of attending meetings. I just feel like that's kind of what you sign up for. And
then what committee you maybe get appointed to or you volunteered for and get on.
yeah, and I don't want to be naive either. I don't want to say that like just ignore it, because I do want the people who are putting in the hours of making sure that they are involved in everything that they can and should be are fairly compensated. Again, meaning the chair.
No.
Yeah, and we did do a fairly substantial increase in per diems a few years back. But recognizing too that we used to operate without an administrator. The committees literally
Did everything.
ran the county. And it was chaos.
I can imagine.
And we weren't compensated very well.
I can
And
imagine.
then we got an administrator.
And we
Basically,
organized,
all our work was getting done for us and we like doubled our own wages.
actually what happened is it organized the chaos. You know, it's still the same, but we got somebody to blame.
It's worth it, isn't it?
Oh, well,
So what do we think? Is it 9,000 out of line for the chair? And then leave the rest of the per diems the same?
I think it's low, but I think there's a lot that goes into, and just the cost of doing it and getting people interested in doing it.
you might stimulate more interest in wanting to do it. I mean, it does encounter insurmountable number of phone calls.
6,000 is really
Things that-
low.
Well, and just to put that into perspective too, though, we gotta remember that if we're looking at the ultimate goal of encouraging more people to do it, there's operational things that need to change, not just the financial incentive, because you can offer, 30 grand if you want to, but if somebody can't attend, they can't attend.
The meeting times and that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
so you're still gonna get the same crop of people.
You know, actually, you're probably correct. And the fact is that there are additional pays to the amount that's being compensated for additional things that you do that are not described definitely by what the chair's position is. They do compensate for additional meetings. If I went to a meeting in Burnett County for some connected resource or whatever we're working on, I would get compensated for that at a per diem rate. So there are some additional compensations. That's not a flat 6,000. You know,
Mhm.
but I know that would be reflective entirely of what effort is expended to do the job as you're willing to do. And so I mean, it's a hard thing to understand for somebody that wants to do it. And there's a lot of people that probably couldn't do justice to it due to the fact they're unavailable at certain times. Unfortunately, it does. The time element is all hours of the day and some into the evenings, you know.
That is a good point too. It's hard to say whether or not the compensation is on target when you don't know, because all we know is the 6,000.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what the rest of the
You know,
compensation
I
looks
don't
like.
know either. And I've been participating in it and I don't know where I sit right now on compensation.
Do we have an idea?
Well, it varies per supervisor. Some supervisors in the past have been very good at billing for their time.
You gotta do
in
the
fact,
expense reports or
Right,
whatever.
you know, and just going to every possible, and doing good work. And then others would go to meetings and not put in a timesheet for it. So it's hard, it's certainly something they could run and give you an idea of what each supervisor is billed.
We actually have a running report. I thought I brought it.
That one on Friday.
Yeah, of how much each supervisor has received
Oh.
by going to meetings and so on. And it ranges from 1,000 or 2,000 to $6,500. So a chairman of a committee who's going to lots of meetings, going into the Madison or WCA meetings, those types of things, they all add up.
Uh-huh.
So
Larry Jepson was really the best at that.
Well, Larry was a good example if you looked his over. He spent a lot of time in county business.
John Bonaprise has to attend a fair amount of meetings.
He
himself.
he's on committees with Wisconsin County Association. That's
think he
very
was our-
important to this county. you
Right.
know, Things that we don't even know about. When you see Highway 65 improvement, you know, he had a lot of influence on that. I think Mo will tell you, he was beating on doors down there. He had little signs made with at the state conventions. He's very active in those type of things.
So that's why I kind of lean a little bit towards being maybe a little more conservative with the base pay side of it and making sure that the variable side of it is being completed as well as possible.
I don't think the base pay is overpaying anybody that takes on a position in the county ultimately,
All right.
you know. The more you get known, the more you're gonna be involved, whether you want to or not, because your phone number is published. And they know where to find it. Some of them memorize it, I think. Seems like it.
No one gets compensated for their phone calls.
No, absolutely not. And that's, you know, there's.
If you don't respond back to your phone calls, the phone will never quit ringing.
And you wait till you get a real issue. Like we contended with the Stour Trail a few years ago when it was contentious. Hundreds of calls. I mean, not just every night you get a phone call here and there or something. You would get 10, 15 a night, one after another.
So where this is just discussion on the agenda, like what's our end?
Before November, the full board needs to pass a resolution directing the compensation.
For the next term.
And nothing is going to compensate everybody equally or justifiably, apparently, because
No.
everybody does
The
things different.
committees are so varied that it depends, and the districts are so varied.
Oh,
I mean, some supervisors would say they would field, 30, 40 phone calls a month. And I might say, I would sit by my phone and wait for a call. That I'd get one or two. So, the time. It is hard to put a compensation amount on it, but that's one of our jobs. Is to make a recommendation to the full board, what we feel as a committee compensation should be, and the board will ultimately decide the next term.
I think, Russ, I think considering the chairman's position by increasing it by to the 9,000 is realistic, I think that that position would warrant it if he doesn't do much of anything else.
He or she.
He or she, I don't remember we ever had one female on, hopefully we'll get one sometime.
And how about the other committee members?
Well, that should be increased. That was the intention last time. I don't think doubling it was a little unrealistic, maybe in my mind, but another $50 a meeting wouldn't be out of line. I don't think.
From 100 to 150.
Change it from 100 to 150.
Would you treat Zoom appearance the same as an actual appearance?
What?
Same
I
company?
wouldn't treat Zoom appearances at all.
Then the vice
So-
chair, the vice chairs should be, at least double. The $1,000 isn't much
Well,
of anything.
You've increased,
Yep.
the discussion is an increase for the chair of 50% for 6,000 to 9,000.
Okay,
The increase for attending meetings is increased 50%, 100 to 150. So a 50% increase for the vice chairs would be from 1,000 to 1,500.
well, that's fine with me. I just think that the 1,000 is too much for you.
Mhm.
What do you guys feel about Zoom meetings?
I just think you have to treat all meetings the same. If you have issues with attendance or anything, you figure out another mechanism to address that. I think you get into a weird territory when you're telling people that you're gonna be compensated differently depending on how you attend.
But we've only ever allowed people to attend, including the public comment during COVID.
Right.
And now it's almost, I don't know, I'm not saying people are using it, but I mean, it'd be a lot easier to fire up your computer at your kitchen table this morning than to drive here and attend this meeting.
Right.
And it's really hard to connect with someone who's not here.
It's as running a meeting. And when they're virtual, I think it's their effect of the attendance virtually is almost nil.
I mean, I
They-
hard disagree with that, cause I've had to attend multiple times, whether it's the monthly meetings or committee meetings, and the reasons that I've done it have either been childcare based or I have meetings for my 9 to 5 job that butt up against county meetings. And if I'm sitting there then, and all of a sudden, if I have a work meeting that I cannot miss and it butts up right next to, say, this meeting, and I know that I'm sitting at home not being compensated, whether or not, this is warranted, like, I'm a little bit salty at that point then, because I am fulfilling my obligations to not just the county, but to also my work, but then I'm getting penalized for it. So that's why I think that just the blanket statement of not compensating Zoom meetings, just I don't think should be considered at all.
The other thing to keep in mind is the next board will set its rules of order. The next board might say, nobody can attend remotely. They might say that, they might decide that you're either here or you're not, and only the public can listen in by Zoom. They could, or they might leave it as it is. I mean,
That's a good
So
point.
could all five of us technically, could we conduct this meeting Zoom? All five of us could be sitting at our kitchen table right now?
right now, yes.
That would be an interesting meeting.
I'm telling you, I sit up there and I know there's somebody on Zoom and I put it in my mind that once we get involved in the meetings and back and forth with
Unless they
everybody,
break in.
unless they break in, I totally ignore them unintentionally, of course. But I totally, and I know I've missed comments when the vote has been over and everything. And I've missed things that have, I should have recognized the individual on Zoom. But, and it's just, maybe it's just me built into my age or, you know, my history, but I've never, Zoom was new to this when COVID came up. If you weren't here at a meeting, you didn't vote. You didn't participate.
And you didn't get compensation.
Then you got no compensation. But
So do you feel that you should be compensated the same for a Zoom meeting as an in-person?
Sorry, I'm gonna preface this with some, like, where I don't believe we have an issue with it. So for example, I'll use the times where I've attended via Zoom. It's been either because I was literally having to drop kids off at daycare or still had a kid sitting in the living room or something like that. That's not happened, actually. I haven't had kids there, but it's usually been travel based where I can't do daycare and this. So I've missed or had to Zoom into a HHS meeting. Or I've had multiple ones where I've sat at my kitchen table and attended via Zoom because I've got external meetings for work with school districts that butted up right against the end point of a meeting. Yeah, I don't see where in those cases, those should be treated any differently. But if somebody was abusing it somehow, and I don't know how you'd write that into rules of order. If somebody was abusing it and just saying like, well, it's an option that I have, I'm gonna take it every week. I just don't think it's a problem that we have right now, and I don't know how you would address it if it became a problem in the future.
we'll address it at the
Rules of order?
rules of order meeting.
Yeah,
I would
I guess
assume.
the next board can decide. We've
Yeah.
allowed it. And we've paid them
Yeah.
the same as an in-person
Yeah, I don't wanna
attendance, so
change
we
that.
can't change that.
No reason.
And we can't decide for the next board whether they're gonna allow it.
Right.
We can only set, well, we could set compensation, couldn't we, for in-person
We
or
can.
Zoom meetings?
I would
Right.
assume.
Correct. This board right now could say that there's a two-tiered system for in-person versus virtual attendance
We
in
can,
that resolution.
we can make on the recommendation, we can make a note or a comment that we included Zoom in our considerations for compensation as part of a meeting to be addressed at the rule of order, you know, so that it just become aware of the fact they want to consider that if give them time to think about it. I'm sure John, telephone is another one, so I mean.
And another thing to consider, and I will say, like, I'm on the same page. I 100% prefer live participation like we're doing right now. I completely agree that you can't have this type of interaction when somebody's having to break in and say, can I say something? That is different. But also if our end game, and we haven't stated this at all, but if any of our efforts are to make this a more accessible thing for people who aren't traditionally interested in being supervisors, then putting more restrictions on the things that make it easier to attend sometimes is going to possibly turn away people who might need that once in a while. So again, is it worth saving 70, say you decrease it by 50%, is it worth saving $75 a meeting to deter somebody from even doing the job? Or is it worth keeping the full participation compensation for somebody who might use it sparingly like I have?
Well, if the recommendation is to increase, I'm just throwing out a suggestion, 50% from $100 to $150.
Okay.
Maybe you have a two-tier amount for $150 for attendance and a certain amount, either 100 or 75 for Zoom.
I think that who's gonna keep track of that?
You're adding,
Or be the clerk.
Well, I like to sit at home. I learned how to run a computer a little bit. And I like, now, elections are coming up too. You gotta go out and get signatures. Wonder if we could do them Zoom some way. So,
Well, I'm sure you can.
well, we can in Arkansas probably, but I'm not real sure about other states.
Yeah, you certainly, to your point, and just as an outside observer, we certainly don't want to recruit supervisors who will say, well, I can do this at home.
Yes.
And, won't take much time and do their other jobs, do their other family matters, and are they paying attention? Are they
Right.
sober?
Can't do it all at home, believe me.
Yeah, and I don't think we've found any supervisor that is exclusively attending by Zoom.
Right. No, I haven't seen that yet.
Well, even John, when he was in Arizona, was attending some by
Yeah.
Zoom, but
I don't know how vague you can be, but maybe you create a new section in the rules of order that talk about, behavior / attendance via Zoom or whatever, the expectation. I don't know if you can spell out expectations in that. Or,
Better be more specific.
Percentage of how many meetings you need to make in person.
yeah, I don't know if you have to be exact or anything, but,
I think you better.
or if it's just a general sense of, are you abusing this policy or not? Cause I hope I don't come across as I am, but I can tell you that a few times it's saved my butt to be able to participate and take care of things at home or work.
yeah, and it's,
I don't mean I'm doing laundry, I'm talking about again, dropping kids off.
and it's very likely too that if only two people showed up to this meeting and we can't get somebody to attend by Zoom,
Right.
Well, that's a
we
good
don't
point
have a
too.
meeting.
Yeah.
We don't have a quorum.
I can't use the child.
We don't know that.
They're
All right,
60
so let's-
something years old.
Let's just leave the Zoom alone. Let the next board decide if they're gonna allow
Yeah.
it.
My
And we'll
idea.
just set what we feel the compensation should be for the next board. And
Add
let 'em take
50%,
it
is
from
that
there.
Is
general
that, are
consensus?
we going,
Is
Oh, we don't
that,
know.
So what is it in, are we talking about 50% for across the
Everybody.
board?
150,
intended.
150 for these meetings in county board? And then 9,000 for the chair.
Chairman, and 1,500 for the, was it 1,500?
well, that was just if you go 50% on all these.
Right.
It'd be 1,000 to 1,500.
Yeah, well,
So that sounds reasonable from a perspective of whatever it was, 4 years ago. You looked at making an increase and it didn't happen, or was it just 2 years ago?
two. Well, yeah, two. would be
Two,
the
but it
first
was for
change.
this term,
Mhm.
so it affected. And now if we don't make a move, another 2 years will go by.
And that had been all the way back to, I don't remember what year
19.
Schmidt was
Oh.
made that proposal to 100. We were at, what, $20 or something?
No, it was $40, I
Was it?
think, for these meetings and 60 for county board.
Oh, that's right.
It was two different amounts.
So can we figure out for the next, so let's say we recommend that right now, and maybe we should preface it with, we don't know in this exact moment that how much that total impact looks like. Like, so can we at the next meeting where we bring it up to everyone, say, here's the estimated cost?
Impact on the budget? you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can do that.
just estimate how much that total number is.
Actually have that sheet where what each supervisor has made
Yeah,
so far.
and you can just maybe do the math off of that. So then we're not just looking at because like I said, it sounds reasonable from a individual's perspective of like, oh, for this meeting, you're going from 100 to 150. It's actually a big percentage increase, but it still for some reason seems reasonable. But then at least we can look at the total number as a group and say, here's what the total expenditure increase is on meeting attendance.
It's
Can you
almost
do
as much as
comparable?
10 chairs.
Can you do a comparable of the 150 and then what Dan Ruck was asking for, the 200?
Yeah, maybe do different levels.
I'm sure there's not much of a difference in the scheme of things.
It's a good idea.
Then the
Well,
whole board can decide.
You want to put in a recommendation in that respect?
Procedurally, does that mean that this committee is recommending something and then there'll be a resolution with those numbers for next Gen Gov? Is that
Yes.
how we're doing this?
Yes.
Okay. So then you
So we have
know
one more crack at it
Right, so,
before it gets too late that it doesn't make it onto county board in time.
Correct.
Why wouldn't we get it to county board? Why would we take another crack at it? Why would
Well,
it come back here again?
Oh, I see.
Could it go to the
want to
county,
know the,
could it go to the county board with the
With the numbers.
Yeah.
And then if it
Yeah.
doesn't get approved there, we would have one more crack at it.
you could amend the county board agenda.
Well, the
It'll
county board
get,
can
it'll
do
get
it.
approved at county board. It may get amended.
They can amend the thing
They can
themselves.
amend our recommendation.
We don't have to recommend. If we recommend now, that'd be sufficient.
So you,
Fight it out at the county board.
And we'll provide,
Maybe in the October meeting, we don't need to amend the agenda for September, do we? Do we
Well,
do it
that's
in
what I-
October?
yes,
Yeah.
it's up to you.
Well,
I
What
thought you were,
happens is if it comes back here, then you have to amend the county board agenda.
Excuse me, we're at a county board meeting. We can decide at the county board meeting what it's gonna be. We don't have to take a recommendation of a committee. We have given the recommendation as a committee to the county board. If the county board don't like it, they can amend it and pass whatever they want.
But it has to
It's
go as a
done.
resolution. Has to go to the county board as a resolution.
Well, it
Right.
comes as a resolution, but it's
so I
amended.
was gonna draft a resolution with the numbers you guys talked about and bring it to the next committee, and it would already be on the county board agenda to set whatever compensation.
It'll be in
What was it?
October's
Correct, that
county
would,
board
that was
agenda.
our intention.
All right, I'm
So-
okay with that. And then we'll just look at the,
I just want to bring something up that is 100% going to sound like sour grapes. There was a senior housing resolution that was brought to the county board from Gen Gov committee where there was not a resolution at the committee level, but it was brought at the board meeting. And it was killed by Supervisor Olson because there was no resolution at the committee level.
That's why we're bringing this back to the committee next month.
Also to go to
having a
committee
resolution.
first
Yeah,
and then,
but it'll already be on the county board agenda.
okay,
So they won't have to amend the county board agenda because we meet so much,
so close
just
to,
so close to county board that
Yeah.
there's not time to anything we do to get on the agenda
yeah.
without amending it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just for consistency's sake, I think we want to make sure there's a resolution at committee before it goes to.
the only way it can skip a committee and go straight to the county board is with suspending the rules of order by a 2/3 majority. So the
To
rules of order
allow it.
state it has to go to a committee first, the resolution itself.
So the numbers we have, 9,000 for the chair, 1,500 vice chair, 150 for meeting attendance. If we come back next month with a resolution.
And we can look at the total number of that and then also with Dan's.
Yeah. For
100%.
everybody. On board.
All right. That didn't take much. How about an update regarding HR, finance and investment policy reviews?
so this committee is responsible for annually approving HR policy, financial policy, and investment policy. Turns out investment policy is part of financial policy. I'll address that in a second, but Claire, if you'll go to the next slide. Let's take HR first. These are the major sections within our HR policy. Two large sections, employment policy and personnel administration. And subheadings you can read for yourself. The word of the day is accretion. Our HR policy has suffered from accretion over time. Well-meaning folks have added parts to the HR policy and it's not necessarily internally consistent. So give you an example. There's statements about how to handle limited term employees, not FTEs or full-time employees, but limited term employees. And the hour amounts with the maximum for a limited term employee within the current HR policy fluctuate, which is not a good thing. We'd like to have just one number. So we're cleaning that up. The HR director, Kim Kruger, and I have done our review. Kim is now taking all of the accreted items and putting them in what appears to be a more correct order. And once she's done with that, it'll go to Corporation Council for their review to make sure we're to the law, and then you'll have a swing at it. But just to give you some presaging of some changes. A couple of years back, the board said, let's have some sort of compensation due to performance. That's the resolution was passed a couple of years ago. The HR policy doesn't track that. So the board wants to do it, but the HR policy doesn't have any stipulations around that. So we'll add that for your review. So that's a big change in the HR policy that you'll get a chance to review. Otherwise, it's a lot of cleanup. And I really want to thank Kim for her efforts there. It's great to have you as a HR director. We'll go on to, unless there's questions about HR policy, we go to finance. Same sort of thing, a lot of accretion in the financial policy. When we look at where most of the work needs to be done, I've got a couple of division directors or department heads in here. Really, the work we've been struggling with is procurement. That's how to buy things. And the policy has levels for procurement. And as the levels go up, there's increasing amounts of control, which is appropriate. And so we're having a look at that. The division directors have all reviewed a draft revision to the procurement policy, and you'll get a chance to have a look at that as well. In terms of sort of some things that we're really focusing on from the general government committee's perspective, there's a stipulation about what purchases above which amount the general government committee should review. And in the policy, it's $75,000. So what does review mean? Back in the administrative coordinator form of government, as Chair Arcan mentioned a little while ago, the committees really ran the county. And review may have included a notion of approval. With the county administrator form of government, that would simply be unworkable to have the general government committee reviewing purchases of any size. So what our thought is that we would like to give you an opportunity to review 3 months of purchases or procurements above $75,000 every quarter. Now, if you thought that was too much, we could do it once a year or half a year. But you haven't had an opportunity to review purchases above $75,000 in a while. So we want to make sure you have that opportunity, not to approve, but to review. So you could look for trends. You could ask us, hey, overall, do your procurements in 2023 look similar to 22 or 21? So that's the sort of thinking we're doing, and we'll draft some language around that for you. The other procurement item that we'd like your attention on is independent financial analysis. Above $150,000 of expense, the current policy says there needs to be an independent financial analysis. It's unclear exactly what that means. Does that mean we hire an external firm to do the independent financial analysis? Does that mean that general government looks at another division's purchase that's over $150,000? We'll try to clean that language up for you. And we've got some draft language that the division directors have already seen. So that's what you can expect on that. Investments, I'll discuss that separately if it's all right with the committee. Any questions about financial policy? I can't remember where we are in the agenda. Am I up here again, or do I sit down for a moment?
Can I ask you go back to the HR policy?
Of course.
So was it that Gen Gov is gonna be involved in the compensation plan in that we'd be looking at what those performance related.
Well, we wouldn't be asking general government to do anything that was connected to particular employees' review or, in other words, evaluation or compensation. We would be looking at the design of the compensation plan and how that sort of pay for performance aspect is incorporated into the overall compensation plan.
And that came because a past board wanted pay for performance.
That's correct. And perhaps the administrator would like to comment, but one of the things that we've done in the last year, again, thanks to staff, and not just the staff that created it, but the staff that's executing it, we've got a performance evaluation system that's now digital. So before we had a paper-based system, really tough to manage. Kim and her team and others and the department and division directors are actually using it now. We have, you know, a digital way to evaluate performance. We didn't really have that before. So we do have the infrastructure, the platform, if you will, that allows us to do, you know, some sort of reward for performance system.
And just coming from the world of education, just something to keep in mind as we do that. And I don't know anything about everything that you have in front of you. Just making sure that as we do pay for performance, that you don't start losing in other areas because somebody starts focusing on what's gonna, it's like teaching to the test as a teacher, you know? You're gonna start making sure that you hit these KPIs and whatever to make sure those are the most important thing, but yet then you're leaving these other things kind of go to waste.
Yeah.
So unintended consequences basically of pay for performance.
And I look at this as taking a small step, which is a big cultural step, but it's a small step to recognize there are differences in performance. And I don't know that we'll have specific things for each job that if you get this, you get extra money, as much as we recognize there's a percentage of people who clearly are outstanding and perform at a level that warrants recognition. And in a given year, that might justify a bonus of some type to that person. And the first thing though that had to start was, how do we assess that? What are we measuring and how do we assess it? We had to coach the coaches, so to speak, so that they understand. So the first step was the performance management document. And then we'll now develop the process to who decide. Good way to do that though, just so you know, in my experience, is peers monitor this. So for one division director to recommend a person for some type of bonus would require that the other directors buy in. So there are ways to make sure we're not funneling this to people who maybe are better at playing the system than others. It's more people that truly are standing out.
That's good.
And I think you are still up there on our update from the investment committee.
I'll try to keep it brief. So just prior to this meeting, the investment committee met and we had a brief agenda. The first order of business was to look at a redrafted investment policy. And the investment committee, which is the treasurer, the county administrator, the board chair, and myself, voted to move that on to general government. So in your packet for next month, you'll see a copy of the redrafted investment policy and have an opportunity to ask questions about it next year. And if next year, I apologize, next month. And if you approve it, and move on to the board for approval. We also discussed our current investments and the fact that the inversion of the yield curve looks like it's sort of re-rotating back to normal. We're seeing some good rates out about 180 days. And so we've got a lot of our general fund and health fund money in cash management accounts right now, which are earning incredible rates of interest for my lifetime, you know, up to 5.25%. So we're now starting to see some longer term yields that equal that. And there's some expectation that interest rates may relax here in the upcoming months and years. So we'll look to, with Amanda's help and our investment managers at PMA look to moving some of our cash into T-bills and CDs. That's called laddering. Any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, what's our broadband update?
Well, we put this on the agenda to keep us moving forward on this, and the update is we're meeting to look at what it is that's holding back more rapid expansion of broadband. The thing that we hear the most from citizens is the cost to run it from the road to the house. We also think there's an education gap in that people don't know yet what the difference is, why it matters to them. So we are looking at avenues to address that. We also now are kind of on hold. I don't have a lot to report because we're waiting to see what the state or the feds are doing. The feds are getting some money to the states. And the governor has mentioned recently that one of his priorities is to offer funds to get it from the road to the house. Don't know if that's going to happen yet. But we continue to look at different ways to help. In fact, Don and I met with a couple of schools or one school, and I've talked with another person, but about how we can help students. And they're less, they seem to think that a lot of the students have pretty good access of people we've talked to. Veterans, we wanted to use them as a pilot project to help an individual veteran who doesn't maybe understand how to use a computer or the internet well. We could train or offer some type of assistance there. We went to the fair, did some surveys at our veterans booth, did not find much of a demand at all. So we're really kind of looking now at what else do we need to do in addition to what we have done, which we, I will say this, that the county is getting the fiber optic cable in the ground. And we've done a good job there. Now the next step is how do we make it more accessible to people through education and through maybe what we're considering is hardware infrastructure support. So it may not be paying for the line in the ground, but it may pay for the router or some installation, because each internet service provider has a unique strategy. Some companies are paying for the connection to the house. Others are not, but they're paying for the routers and the installation and the service. So just that we're continuing to move forward as we gather more information. We'll let you know.
Education is going to increase your demand.
It is, but and it's also, well, increase the demand of the internet service provider.
Sure.
Because the calls I get now, and I get them probably every other week or so, another person that will say, I'm not going to pay $1,500 to run it from the road to my house. And I don't blame them. That's a lot of money. On the other hand, when they start thinking about the value, the home values, what it does for their children or how they can use it, then they start thinking about, well, maybe it is worth more than I thought.
Education.
All right, are we gonna have a closed session on WPPA negotiations? We are?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's maybe let's do our work plan and subject matters while we're still in open session. So when we come out, we don't have to. We got anything for our 2023 committee work plan that we need to add, delete? We're on schedule.
Well, we could put the review and consider ratifying the investment policy for next month. We've got we're going to be moving we'll be moving the resolution forward for supervisor pay. So if that hasn't been documented, let's get that done.
All right, if someone has a subject matter that they'd like to get on the agenda for our next meeting, I don't know who is Vince the one to get a hold of, or me or somebody, you know, let somebody know, we'll try to get it on the agenda. Anything, any other?
I would just add that I'm guessing we'll have another, I think we have WPPA on for the next several months, but in case we don't, I'm sure we will be that one more time.
You know. All right, somebody under Wisconsin State Statute 19851E. Get us into a closed session.
I'll make that motion, go into closed session into this section.
Second.
We'll have a roll call vote. Jay?
Yes.
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 All right, we have one item to go.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Stand adjourned at 10:49.